My name is Pat Kenneally, and I'm the McHenry County State's Attorney. I'm thrilled to be here. I myself am married to my beautiful wife, Colleen, who I love, happily married. We have 4 boys, 10, 8, 6, and 4. So Patrick, John, James, and Thomas, and we're members of St. Thomas Church in Crystal Lake. All of my boys go to St. Thomas Catholic School. I'm deeply Catholic. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but I sort of had a spiritual convert. I was raised Catholic, cradle Catholic, just Irish parents. 3 of my grandparents are actually from Ireland, but wasn't necessarily, let's say, the most pious person, the paragon of virtue that you see before you today for all of my life. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. I've been the McHenry County State's Attorney since 2016. And love the job. I worked in the office from 2006 to 2016 when they asked me to run for state's attorney, and they called me into the office, and I was special prosecutor at the time, and I was thinking to myself, like, man, did I screw something up? Like, what have I done? And as I'm going, and then they said, well, no, we want you to run for state's attorney. And I said, oh, I was like, well, like, it costs a lot of money. They're like, no, it doesn't cost that much money. I was like, yeah, but isn't politics like really nasty, especially local politics? They're like, it's really not that bad. Like, you're not, like, it's really, honestly, like, it's, like, yeah, you'll catch a little flack, but it's, and so they BS'd me on all that stuff. And so anyway, I decided to run, learn the hard way, and here I am. So I'm here to talk to you guys about marijuana. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. So let's think about what the problem is here, okay? On the one hand, on the left, you have State's Attorney Kenneally asked lawmakers to vote against marijuana legislation. What you see on your left is a dork, okay? What you see on your left is a guy that wears Crocs with socks and probably a fanny pack on Saturday, all right? And so, like, we're talking to the kids, you know, and it's like, hey, kids, this guy right here is telling you not to use marijuana, whereas these people over here are showing you what a cool, awesome lifestyle marijuana gives you. And so that's fundamentally the problem. Now, when I first started as state's attorney, okay, so I started smoking marijuana when I was 15 years old. And me and my friends, at some point between probably the age of when I was 15 and 21, I was probably in possession of marijuana, or one of my friends were carrying. And it never really occurred to me. I think one of the things about youth is sort of you have some of these immunities from consequences because people are trying to protect you, and then as you get older, you do begin suffering more consequences. But I think me and my friends didn't really notice many of the consequences that we were suffering. I think back on all of the time that I wasted and all of the missed opportunities to do all of the cool things that I saw all these other kids that I thought were dorks doing, like going to Washington, D.C. on leadership conferences and doing all this neat stuff, whereas me and my friends were just trying to get alcohol and try to smoke pot. And then, 19, all right, my friend, Justin Millard, goes off to college, and we were all smoking a lot of marijuana. He goes off to college, and he has a nervous breakdown. And he's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he has to come home. And Justin, from then until now, has been suffering from a horrible form of mental illness that has destroyed his entire life, that has affected his family in ways that are immiserating. I now look back on that, and I say to myself, is there some connection? And I can promise you that there is some connection. So anyway, when I was running in 2016, I just had not sort of been spun up and read in on many of the problems with marijuana. So people would come up with me, and I was a Republican, and people would breathlessly come up to me. They'd be like, yeah, they're going to legalize marijuana. Like, what are we going to do about it? This is going to be horrible. And I'd just sort of be like, calm down. It's not that bad. It's better for you than alcohol, you know, and a lot of people are already doing it. Nothing to worry about. And so as part of that process, so one of the things I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do a little research on this, and when I do a little research, then I'll be able to sort of have some ammunition to fight back when people come up to me and want to have a contentious debate about marijuana. And in the same way that an atheist goes and begins to read the Bible to show everybody how absurd it is, and just so that they can fight with Catholic people, and then by the time they get to Revelation, they're completely converted. After I started reading about marijuana, I came to see that this is a major, major problem. And the way that I actually became a Republican was that I could see all of the nonsense that many of the Democrats were saying about criminal justice reform. And I was in the criminal justice system. And so they talk about criminal justice reform, mass incarceration, and racism and all that. And I was like, that's nonsense, 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 nonsense. And I thought to myself, well, if they're saying that that's nonsense about that, like what else maybe are they saying which is just complete nonsense? And marijuana was the epitome of bad information being believed broadly by the public because it is pushed out to you with super hip, ultra cool, perfect public relations, and then people just getting to the point with marijuana where they just sort of shrug and they're like, no big deal, right? No big deal. So it's just that shrug that ultimately pushed them over the finish line. But let me tell you how they actually passed this bill, okay? So, Joby Pritzker, anybody heard of her? Okay, she lives in Washington, D.C. She's brother to our fearless governor. She's sister to our fearless governor. And she worked for an institution called the Marijuana Policy Project, a D.C. lobbying firm. And it's an industry group. The whole point of it is to promote marijuana and to try to increase the rate of legalization and to pass laws throughout the state. There's this lawyer named Chris Lindsay who they dispatched to Illinois, and they go to two people. They go to Toy Hutchinson in the Senate, who was a former Democratic senator from Chicago, and they go to Kelly Cassidy. All right, and Kelly Cassidy is somebody in the House of Representatives. If you're involved in any of these issues, you know that both of them have not necessarily been very progressive. Okay. So the Marijuana Policy Project writes the bill, and they say this at the time that they legalize marijuana. They have a press conference, and the first thing that they do, they go, "We'd like to thank Chris Lindsay for writing this bill, and we were just so thrilled that they entrusted us with this bill to push it through the Illinois legislature." So they did it, and they did it almost exactly as Bonnie Quirk described. So this is a major policy shift. This is a change of drug policy in the state of Illinois that has been in place for almost 100. That has been placed since the state was founded in 1818. How long do you think the debate on marijuana legalization was? Anybody have any idea?
Was there one?
It's like half a day, and two people talked, one from the Democratic side, one from the Republican side, and that was it. And then they just ram it all through. Now, incidentally, after legalization, Toy Hutchinson, what do you think happens to her?
It's hired by the Cannabis.
She becomes the president and CEO of Marijuana Policy Project in Washington, D.C. Okay, Kelly Cassidy's wife becomes the vice president of Revolution Cannabis, which is one of the biggest cannabis cultivators in the state of Illinois. So if you ever want to know, if you ever had any doubt, and I know I'm adding to your cynicism, and I apologize for that because there's not much good news, but I'm just going to tell you the truth. If you ever want to know how laws get passed in the state of Illinois, especially laws like this, now you know. All right? Okay, so anyway, that's that. All right, so cannabis sativa, that's the Latin scientific name. Marijuana, does anybody know what marijuana means? People think it means Mary Jane, but no, it actually is derived from an Aztec word, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, which means prisoner, which is interesting. And so there's a lot of people that are like, hey, like marijuana, it's just about freedom and my ability to do what I want to do. I would say, I was like, does it really promote your freedom? Like, one of the problems with getting high is just sort of this tedious self-absorption. You know what I mean? Like this journey into inner space and yourself and your own thoughts. And are you free at that point to pursue what, let's say, people generally mean when they said we want freedom from a tyrannical government? Like, are you free to pursue your family's best interests? Are you free to pursue a career? Or are you free to pursue your civic obligations? Or are you imprisoned by a drug? All right. So THC is the tetrahydrocannabinol. We're going to talk a little bit about the endocannabinoid system, which is not really a thing. Well, it is a thing, but it's not what they say it is. But there's two types of cannabinoids that are at issue. So one is THC, and then the other is CBD. And you've probably heard a lot about both of those two things. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So these compounds are found in the leaves and the flowers of female plants, and also the resin. Does everybody know what resin is? Does everybody know what that is? It's sort of like that sticky substance. You know when you touch a plant and like that sticky substance, that's what resin is. THC can be isolated, so there's all kinds of solvents, and now there's all kinds of new ways in engineering by which they've been able to isolate THC, which creates some interesting problems, but also it sort of falls into their marketing. So now they can get a perfect dose of THC. So they can say, like, this pill has 10 milligrams of THC, in the same way that you're taking 20 milligrams of Coumadin and you're taking 50 milligrams of Eliquis or whatever it is. Now THC, so now they've sort of tried to appropriate a pseudo-medical science, and especially if you're trying to use it as medicine, which you're trying to rebrand it as medicine, which it's not. We're going to talk about it. Now you can have 10 milligrams. But it also, they can put it in gummies, and they can call them the Incredibles, which obviously and they can have like cartoonish type of packaging, which appeals obviously to people who are younger. And then they can put it into tinctures, which is also something which has been associated with snake oils and medicine and all the rest of it, and on and on and on. The possibilities they can put it in beer and drinks, and the possibilities now are endless with respect to how you can get THC. And because of that, we all, one of the things from a marketing standpoint, and again, I'm going to touch upon this later, is that there's this whole cannabis lore. Like when you think about cannabis, you generally associate it with, let's say, an unpopular subculture, hippies, you know what I mean? Or people sort of on the margins. And they've developed this whole sort of apocryphal lore about when you can smoke cannabis, how you got to pass to the left, and 420, and it's become so arcane and complicated. One of the challenges for the dispensaries has been to try to clarify it, to make it fit for everybody for all-day consumption all the time, and that's one of the marketing challenges that they have, and I'm going to talk to you about how they do it. But a big way that they're trying to do it is to isolate certain compounds and then pretend that it's medicine, or pretend that they're giving you a perfect dose, etc. Okay, all right. Who thinks cannabis has medical benefits? There he is, right there. Hang your head in shame, sir. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. So, okay, so let's talk about the medical benefits. So there was a big study by the National Academy of Sciences that was done in 2017. And there's different types of science, so one of the ways that that cannabis has convinced us that it has medical properties is by these low-grade, poor quality studies where the donors of the people funding the studies are the cannabis industry themselves. So the University of New Mexico has a research institute on particularly devoted to cannabis. Who do you think funds it? Who do you think funds it? Cannabis industry funds it. The cannabis industry completely funds this. Now, in order to get FDA approval for a drug, and in order to go through the type of pristine studies, double-blind, that you actually need to go through in order to get a drug approved by the FDA, costs about $2 billion. All right, they give these universities whatever, a few $1 million to run these low-grade studies. And there's different types of studies. There's like survey. So one of the studies that you can do is you can be like, well, I'm going to survey doctors, all right, and I'm going to survey those doctors that prescribe cannabis. So what do you think their ideology already is with respect to this stuff? And I'm going to ask them. This is what they did with climate change. And I'm not saying anything about climate change. I'm not. I'm really not, okay? But I'm not. But one of the things that they'll say is, you should believe this proposition because this many people agree with the proposition. Now, does that sound like good science? No, that's terrible science. That's not double-blind studies. That's not systematic reviews of all of the studies that have been done. That's not a meta-analysis of all of the studies that have been done. Okay, anyway. They did the National Academy of Sciences, which is a prestigious organization. They did a meta-analysis, and they found, okay, that there's moderate evidence that it can treat pain in adults. They found that there's moderate evidence to support treatment for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, a very small select group of people, okay? And they found that it can be good for improving short-term, keep that in mind, sleep outcomes for people with certain diseases, especially diseases like Parkinson's disease, but again, a very small subset of people. There was a recent study done with regard to chronic pain, and it was also a meta-analysis, and here's what it found, okay? They gave cannabis to people, and then they gave a placebo to people that people thought were cannabis, okay? And cannabis, they found, works in reducing pain. Okay? But it didn't work any better than the placebo. Because the placebo effect is real. The placebo effect is substantial. The placebo effect is a real thing. If I give you something and I say, this is cannabis, and it will make you feel better, and you believe that the cannabis is going to make you feel better, you will feel better, and you will report that you feel better. But it also turned out that the more people had read about medical journals and in articles and magazines and whatever, that cannabis has a medical application, the bigger the placebo effect. Okay? And also with respect to pain, like, if cannabis is medicine, so is Budweiser. All right? If I'm at a party and I've got a couple cocktails in me, you know, and I'm stumbling my way to the bathroom and I stub my toe, it's not going to hurt as bad. It's not going to hurt as bad. Okay? So if you're going, so when you dump a bunch of dopamine into your brain, which creates a ton of positive emotion, you're going to feel better, and the pain that you feel in your back or your fibromyalgia or whatever the case may be is not going to be as bad as it was for that period by which you're high. So no, cannabis does not treat pain. Here's what it does do, okay? It impairs cognitive domains of learning, memory, and attention, and it reduces IQ. Kids that smoke cannabis on a regular basis, on average, have an IQ that is 6 to 8 points less than kids who don't. Parents, wake up. Increases the risk of schizophrenia and other psychosis. There was the coup de grace on this issue. Everybody says, like, oh, it's correlation and not positive, and people are treating themselves as opposed to cannabis actually causing it. No. There was a study done, okay, in 2023, and I always screw this up. The Danes are Holland, right? Okay, thank you. It was a Danish study, and they have access to all of the medical records there because it's a single payer system over there. So they looked at 6 million medical records, which is the largest study to date. All right, and they looked at the correlation between people who use cannabis, when they started using cannabis, what type of cannabis they use, how often they're using cannabis, etc. All right, and they found that a third of the cases of schizophrenia, 1/3 of the cases of this devastating disease that destroys lives, destroys families, destroys communities, could have been prevented but for that person smoking cannabis. Think about that. And that's in men. Think about that. 1/3 of the cases of schizophrenia could have been prevented had that person not smoked cannabis. It increases the risk for development of depressive disorders. It increases the incidence of suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts. In 2022, McHenry County had its most suicides ever. In fact, it doubled from 2021. What do you think the most common drug found in the toxicology of the decedent's work? You know, THC, not alcohol. I would have thought alcohol, not alcohol. All right, increases the incidence of suicidal ideation as well as suicidal attempts, and that's with kids. Increases substance abuse dependence and substance abuse disorders such as alcohol, tobacco, and illicit drugs. I'll show you the studies on that later. Everybody gets mad when I say it's a gateway drug. Don't yell at me. Yell at the scientists who say that it's a gateway drug. Increases the risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Worsens respiratory problems. There was also a recent study that increases your risk of a heart attack as well as heart disease and other things by a factor of 2. Pregnant women, it lowers infant drug use. 9% of users become addicted. I think there's reason to think that it's a hell of a lot more than that. And low productivity and job performance. It's not good. It doesn't do anything good. And so people will be like, yeah, but alcohol is legal. My response to that is, well, as a state's attorney, I can tell you that alcohol is probably upstream of 70% of the crimes that I see. Alcohol is responsible for the fraying of the social fabric. Alcohol is responsible for destroying countless families every single day. Do we want more of that? Is that what we want? We want more of that? Okay, you all know that this is sort of what it does, relax feeling, but let's talk about it. Okay, so these are just some quotes that I pulled from the internet, okay? These are people describing the effects of marijuana, for those of you who haven't smoked it, all right? Or ingested it in some way. Time will be slower, you'll have HD vision, kind of like a dream, but not really. More like you're looking through the lens of a camera. Things will be funnier, munchies, increased heart rate, something unreal, not like hallucinating, but you know, it feels like my body is one step behind my mind. Here, look at this one. It's like taking the best day of your life and setting it on fire in a glass bowl and inhaling the sweetness from I feel like there's hope. All right, so we gotta step back and think about this, okay? Like, look at these two things. Do these strike you as well-adjusted people? No. Okay. And if you feel as if there's no, okay, so one of the problems with substance abuse disorder, which is what they'll tell you when you go to any AABD, is that when you find the substance that you like, when you find the substance that solves your problem, your emotional development as a human being ceases. All right? Because if you're suffering from negative emotion, if you're suffering from mental tension, one of the things that you're going to try to do is to figure out, well, how do I get around that? How do I stop feeling that way? And ultimately, the way that you stop feeling that way is by emotional maturation, by growing up, by taking responsibility for certain things, and by moving towards a goal. Okay? That's where positive emotion comes from. You have an objective, and you begin moving towards it. As soon as you find a substance that just makes you magically feel better, you stop growing as a person. And if you have no hope, and you find this one substance that is the one thing that gives you hope, you think you're going to want to give that substance up? Ever? You think that's not a risk of substance abuse issues, of addiction, and all the rest of it? It can make you feel like you're locked up in your own thoughts for hours. The thoughts can be unpleasant, paranoia, or unusual thoughts, which can make you feel terrified or nervous. Okay, now this guy writes for a men's magazine, and he went out to Colorado on a cannabis tourist thing, and he's like, I'm just going to get a hotel room. I'm going to get some gummies, and I'm going to write down how I feel, and I'm going to write an article about it. Okay. Okay, so he says 2 hours after dose. The AD is after the gummies that he took. This is nice. Whole body feels warm and loose, limber. I should stay here in this place. Maybe pet the dog a bit. Just floating on a sea of DGAF, which is, pardon me, don't give a fuck. That's a dumb phrase. Why did you type it? Do ships sail on the seas of don't give a fuck? What would those ships be named? USS Fuck Not Given, RMS Queen Fuck It, USS Fucky Fucky Fuckaroo. I spend 5 minutes thinking of more ship names. I come up with a great one, the most creative and wittiest thing that has ever left my brain. By the time I get up and walk to the computer, I can't remember what it was, so I eat half a pint of raspberry sorbet and then rummage around the fridge. You want this guy serving you food at a restaurant? You want this guy driving your taxi? If the whole idea is like, well, you can take it like wine, you want this guy looking after a kid at night after he gets home from work, after 2 hours after dosing? Current Illinois laws. All right, so this is what used to be illegal. So under 10 grams, which is a dime bag, that used to be a civil violation, which was punishable essentially by a traffic ticket, $100 to $200. 10 grams to 30 grams, this is now legal. So you can possess anything less than 30 grams. And then anything over 30 grams is a Class A misdemeanor. So that's all that's been legalized. So everybody talks about, well, like it's gonna improve the criminal justice system and mass incarceration. None of those people with getting misdemeanor offenses were going to prison. I can promise you that, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. Look at everything that's still illegal. Okay, so this is just sort of what the Illinois law was that legalized cannabis for recreational use. 21 years or older, and you can't use it in public space. As we talked about, 30 grams. You can also grow 5 plants. Okay, so here's how it's a whole sort of contained economic ecosystem. You have to get a license to cultivate cannabis. So there's a bunch of growers in Illinois. Many of them are warehouse growers. So if you're talking about like greenhouse gas effects, they're using a ton of electricity. Then there's processors, the people that process it. Then there's also craft growers, so people that can grow a small amount, think of like a microbrewery. Then there's transporting organizations, taking it from the cultivators to the dispensaries, and then there's the dispensaries. Now, in order to get a license, you have to be what's called a social equity applicant. All right, so you have to think about this, all right? This is an incredibly lucrative form of business. Everybody wanted a dispensary license, everybody wanted a cultivator license, etc. So your application had to be perfect and all of it balanced on a nice edge, okay? You would get an extra, I forget what it was, I think it was 50 points if you were a social equity, which meant that you were a minority and you lived in a drug affected area, and then you'd get even more points if you've been convicted of prior marijuana offense.
Don't get out of here.
Okay?
What?
Okay? So for all of us idiots who decided that we were going to obey the law, and move our family out of a drug-affected area, we can't take part in this lucrative economic opportunity in the state of Illinois.
It's ridiculous.
Taxes, up to 33%. Now everybody says, well, like one of the reasons why we have to legalize marijuana is because when we do, we're going to dry out the black market. Okay? Who thinks that's true? It's not true, and the reason it's not true is because if you want to buy legal cannabis, you're paying a premium of 33%. Okay? So all the black market has to do, and keep in mind, quality's not an issue anymore. They got stuff coming in from California and Colorado. They got all the good stuff. All right? So all you have to do in order to outcompete the market is to come in under that 33%. And we've created, when you legalize cannabis, you're sending not only a social message, you're also sending a cultural, you're not only sending a legal message, you're sending a cultural message, which is this is no big deal. This is acceptable. All right? And who do you think the people are that report crimes to the police? Like, the police don't prevent crime, the police respond to crime. You prevent crime. And so if the pervasive and ubiquitous message out there is cannabis is no big deal, and it's all legal now, so it doesn't matter, and you see 6 guys loading plants into the back of a truck, you're a lot less likely to call the cops. So this is exactly the type of environment that drug dealers, and especially cartels, want to operate in, and they can operate with impunity. And guess what? If you buy illegal cannabis and you're in possession of cannabis not bought at a dispensary, but it's less than 30 grams, you're cool. So there's no disincentive for you to not buy it from your drug dealer as long as it's less than 30 grams. Okay, if all this money is going to go to schools, right? No. 35% goes to the general fund, 25% goes to restoring the community fund, whatever the hell that is. Okay, 20% goes to mental health and substance abuse, we're going to need it, and 10% is transferred to budget stabilization fund. Again, whatever that means. Right, okay, so let's talk about sales. So this is 2021, 2022, 2023. We're at about 1.2 bill in sales. Want to trip on you? Okay, and this is the revenue in tax revenue. So we're at, so it's actually gone down from 2022, but we're at, the state's getting about $400 million. So they talk about cannabis as if it's the panacea to all of your health problems, but they also talk about cannabis as if it's the panacea to all of our problems in the state of Illinois. All right? Does anybody know how much debt the state of Illinois is in?
Depends on who you ask, but.
It varies, but one estimate is over $300 billion. Okay? So if they're using this to solve our budget crisis, we're going to have to sell cannabis. And let's think about the math. We're going to have to sell We're going to have to sell cannabis for the next 600 years to our residents to pay off the debt that we're in right now.
Well, assume a deficit doesn't get.
Again, with all kinds of assumptions built in. But I went to law school because my math is horrible. So I'm just giving you a sense of why that is just not true, and that as a talking point should fall flat. All right, another thing that, there's lies and there's damn lies. And one of the lies that they told was that, well, it's not going to increase use, and anybody that wants to smoke cannabis in Illinois already has access to it and is smoking it. So why don't we just legalize it in the state and get the money? But one of the reasons why we don't want to legalize it is because a hell of a lot more people are going to be smoking cannabis. And this is what we said. No. Anybody that has access to it, the black market is already robust enough. It doesn't matter. No, it does matter. Okay? Illinois. Okay? Look at 2017. 15.3% of the people had said that they'd used cannabis in the past year. 2018, 2019, 16.4%. And then 2021, it's jumped 30%. So this is any past cannabis use in the last 30 days. So these are people that are regularly using cannabis, and the 26 and older crowd is definitely increasing significantly. But the biggest increase, of course, is in the 18 to 25-year-olds. That's exactly when we want to do it, because your brain is really starting to fully mature. So let's make sure that we're getting those people to smoke as much cannabis. And this is just based on surveys. So you got to remember, a lot of this is going to be underreported because it's what people are going to be willing to admit. All right, so here's, this is a big problem. So the fundamental people who are driving the cannabis industry are the people who are smoking it every day. The people that have cannabis use disorder. This proves it. Look, frequency of past cannabis use. Over half of the people who have used cannabis in the last 30 days are using it more than 20 to 30 days. So half of the cannabis industry's consumer base is using it more than 20 days a month. All right? Now, does anybody know what SMI stands for? Okay. Serious mental health illness. Okay? Okay. So of the people with a serious mental health illness who are using cannabis, well over half of the people are using it more than 20 days a month. It's insane. No pun intended. All right, well, cannabis use, we're going to not drink as much alcohol, and alcohol is worse for you than cannabis use. Here's liquor consumed in gallons in the state of Illinois. As you can see, no change. They also said, well, it's good for opioid use therapy, and there's going to be a lot less people that are going to be using opioids for their pain because cannabis is going to be legal. No, that's not true. They've done a ton of studies on this issue, and they found that opioid use, that cannabis legalization in places like Colorado, Washington, Illinois, all over the country have had no impact on opioid use or abuse. Here's the studies on the gateway drug hypothesis. All right, so here's... if you want to don't get mad at me, get mad at Professor Mayette and Professor Bew and Professor Palmer and Professor Ferguson and all of them. Okay, so you can take a picture of that and you can read that in your own time, but it is a gateway drug. It's a gateway drug with respect to tobacco, it's a gateway drug with respect to alcohol, and it's a gateway drug with respect to opioids. If you're smoking cannabis, even if you control for other factors, it increases the likelihood that you're going to engage in other type of use. Okay. So one of the things that it did, one of the things that the cannabis legislation did, the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, is that it set up this committee that was going to examine the health effects of cannabis. All right, and if you look at that committee, many of the charts that I've shown you come from their annual report on cannabis and all that. One of the things that they don't report is the increased use among blacks, Hispanics, and the impoverished. All right, the rate of cannabis use disorder and the rate of cannabis use among the black population is twice that of the average, and it's the same with the impoverished. But they don't report that. That's not part of their annual report. Reverend Gregory Seal Livingston, courageous guy, formerly of the Rainbow Push Coalition, he said that profit is the motive. Legalization advocates are plimping black and Hispanics. And if you're only going to give licenses to people who come from cannabis-affected areas or low-income areas, where are generally crime-ridden areas, where do you think they're going to set up their shops? Okay, we solved the problem. So even let's say I concede, which I won't, which I don't know that I necessarily would, but let's say I concede the point that too many people were being arrested for cannabis, and that we want to make the laws proportional to the harm that cannabis is causing. And we don't necessarily want to be arresting people for personal use and throwing them in jail and having them get bail, and if they can't pay the $100 bail, then they're stuck in jail for days, if not weeks, if not months while they get. Okay, let's say I concede that point. The answer was decriminalization. The answer was not legalization, because when you legalize something, and when you say to prodigious economic and market forces, when you say to capitalism, here's a product, your goal is to get as many people using it as frequently as you possibly can. When you unleash those forces onto a public, it's a major problem because they succeed, because they're very, very good at that. So in addition to the cultural message, there's also these remarkable forces of capitalism that are at work when you're talking about this stuff. And so the answer would have been decriminalization. And if you look at Cook County, all right, in 2011, this was before decriminalization. This was before less than 10 grams of cannabis was a traffic ticket. They had over 21,000 misdemeanor marijuana arrests. After decriminalization, that was dropped to 129 misdemeanor marijuana arrests. And if they had just kept along that policy, by this point, it probably would have been 0, and we wouldn't be having all of the problems that we're otherwise having. People versus Bishop, all right? Jim Bishop in, I forget the year, but I think it was 2022 or 2021, was a Chicago resident. He was about my age, and he had suffered from mental health problems in the past. He decides, after a bad night with respect to smoking cannabis and some of his mental health illnesses, that he's going to take a drive, and he ends up out in McHenry, and he's listening to Howard Stern, and David Spade is interviewing him, and David Spade tells him that he should that he should turn his car into oncoming traffic and crash into oncoming traffic, which he summarily did at 80 miles an hour, killing the driver, father of 2, and the passenger of that car is in a rehabilitation facility, and also a father of 2, and will be there for the rest of his life because he suffered from serious brain trauma as well as and his body is essentially broken. All right? McHenry County. One of the experts diagnosed him with cannabis-induced psychosis. People versus Mackey, 2023, another McHenry County case. Man goes to the bar, brings home a younger man who sort of was living this transient life. They're consuming a significant amount of cannabis over the course of the evening. Mr. Mackey has had mental health disorders in the past, and at some point, we don't necessarily know all of the details because of how disordered the whole evening was. Mr. Mackey puts a shotgun in the mouth of his young companion and pulls the trigger. First-degree murder. People versus Aaron Fox. Aaron Fox also suffered from mental health issues, was smoking cannabis on a daily basis. She was living with her boyfriend's parents, and at some point during their rape, there was friction in the house, and she stabs both of the parents to death. All right? So one of the things we know about schizophrenia, one of the things that we know about psychosis, one of the things that we're learning about cannabis-induced, one of the things we know is that if you're in one of these states, your capacity for violence increases by multiple orders of magnitude. All right? I went back and I looked at all of the murders in McHenry County. We don't have the gang violence that Chicago has, even like a Waukegan or North Chicago. So you can sort of take those murders out. All right? So all of the murders in McHenry County, half of them, approximately, were caused by people that were diagnosed with one of 3 things: schizophrenia, bipolar with psychotic symptoms, schizoaffective disorder.
Over what period of time?
That's from 2010. Okay? That's from 2010.
Today?
Until today. All right? That's less than 2% of the population. Less than 2% of the population is responsible for nearly 50% of the murders in McHenry County. And we know that cannabis use increases the rate by which people suffer from psychosis, bipolar, schizophrenia. So for everybody that tells you that cannabis just chills you out and makes you peaceful, for some people it does, for some people it makes you crazy. Okay. Let's talk about driving under the influence of alcohol. Let me go to this slide and then I'll come back. Okay, so this is part of that annual report that I was talking to you about, and this is just a study that they summarize. And what they said is traffic fatalities increased 2.2 per billion miles driven after retail legalization, which may account for as many as 1,400. So the lives, just they matter-of-factly say there's 1,400 people. Okay, 1,400 traffic fatalities annually. States that legalized early experience larger traffic fatality increases. So they knew that this was a problem. They knew that we didn't have a good way to determine whether or not somebody was under the influence of cannabis. They knew that we didn't have a good scientific test to determine whether or not somebody was under the influence of cannabis. So let's just step back, and then I want to show you this slide. Okay, cannabis drug testing results for drivers in fatal crashes by state and the U.S. Okay, this is the U.S. This is people after a fatal traffic accident that tested positive for cannabis. Okay, 2018, oh, same. Oh, what happened? 2020. Okay, so now let's go back. In order to find somebody guilty of driving under the influence of alcohol, we, as the state, have to prove that they were under the influence of any drug or combination of drugs, under the influence or combined influence of alcohol or other drugs, or there's THC is 5 nanograms milliliter of blood per 10 milliliters of other body fluids. Okay, let's talk about the first one. All right, Kenneally leaves here, goes to his car, takes a long rip. I'm stoned, and I'm gonna drive back to Crystal Lake. All right, and no, let's go back on the counterfactual. Kenneally decides that he's gonna reach into his glove compartment and he's gonna get a thing of scotch and he's gonna down it. Man, you know, that was super nervous for that presentation, and just relief. Like, now I feel great. Okay, so I get in my car and I'm driving back to Crystal Lake. I run a stoplight and I kill a family of 4. All right. I'm injured, so the ambulance has to take me. So it's not like I can do field sobriety tests. You know, it's not like the police can observe me, observe how I talk, bloodshot, glassy eyes, slurred speech, over alcohol. By the time that the police are actually able to observe me, it's 2 hours later because I've had to get some medical procedures, whatever the case may be. I'm guilty because when I go to the hospital, they're going to draw my blood. And when they draw my blood, they're going to know what my blood alcohol concentration. And it turns out that there is an actual proportional relationship between blood alcohol concentration and impairment. Turns out that there is. All right, and they've established that over decades of studies. With THC, there's not that direct proportional relationship. THC is what's called hydrophobic. I think that was up on one of the slides before. That means it hates water. All right, which means that when you consume cannabis, unlike alcohol, which loves water, which is hydrophilic, cannabis is trying to get out of your blood, just chemically, it's getting out of your blood as quickly as it possibly can, navigating to the fatty parts of your body. You know where the fattiest part of your body is?
Backside.
Right here, your brain, okay? 90% of cannabis that you ingest is out of your system within 30 minutes of smoking it. All right? So, what that means is a couple things. First of all, what it means is that I can be held responsible if I consume alcohol. Now let's switch up the hypothetical. I'm driving, okay, and I decide that I'm going to take some cannabis gum. No, I'm going to smoke cannabis when I get in my car, and I'm driving back to Crystal Lake. I'm high, all right? It takes me about 45 minutes to get there. I'm on the back stretch, almost home. Most of the cannabis is all out of my system. I crash. I get into the ambulance, all right? They take me to the hospital. By the time they actually get me to the hospital, it's over an hour after it's well over an hour after I smoke cannabis, maybe even 2 hours, whatever the case may be. This may not be there. But even worse, even if that is there, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm high on cannabis. Because unlike alcohol, the cannabis in your blood does not necessarily mean there's no proportional relationship, scientifically, between the cannabis in your blood and your level of impairment. And they knew that. The National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration, the federal agency, said that this 5 nanogram milliliter standard is based on something, quote, other than evidence. They knew that, but in order to appease people that were saying, like, hey, we got a major problem with cannabis and driving under the influence of alcohol, they're like, oh, well, we'll put in the 5 nanogram standard and that'll be fine. Now, in addition to that, let's say I just get pulled over for driving under the influence of alcohol. And I said, you're not taking my blood. Like, there's no way that you're taking my blood, all right? You can go get a warrant. I'm going to fight you. The Supreme Court recently said that you basically cannot force somebody to draw their blood. I said, you're not taking my blood, and I'm not talking to you. Yeah, sure, I'll do field sobriety tests. Field sobriety tests were designed to detect people for driving under the influence of alcohol. They weren't designed to detect people for being under the influence of cannabis. One leg stand, sure, no problem. You know, walk and turn, no problem. Got that. I'm going to go have another brownie, and I'm going to go home. Any more questions, officer? You know? Major problem. So, but it's a major problem because if I'm one of the people that test positive for cannabis, and I've hurt somebody, and we don't have the 5 nanogram standard, especially if I'm brought to the hospital and the police can't observe, let's say, how I talk, or there's people who have smoked cannabis have a certain affect, bloodshot eyes, sort of. If the police don't get a chance to observe me for hours after the actual crash, and my blood cannot be used because it's below 5 nanograms because most of that cannabis has gotten out of my system, how are we going to get justice for that family? And people, they'll come to me, State's Attorney Kenneally. I'll say, I don't know. All right, this is the last thing I want to cover. Okay, so as we talked about, cannabis use has always been associated with an unpopular subculture. All right, and so now they want you to use cannabis. They want all of you to use their product. All right. So how are they going to do that? Well, one of the ways that many of the public relations people, many of the marketers, they've come up with is like this clean functionality that looks like a healthcare service. Okay. So this is from a cannabis website in Illinois, and it says, "We care about you." All right. No, they don't. With 10 milligrams of THC, our boba pearls provide an alternative, natural way of healing without the use of industrial pharmaceuticals. So don't take your medication that your doctor prescribes. This is, we have the end. We have a natural solution to your medical problems. We offer a broad array of cannabis edibles geared to address illnesses and injuries. One team will guide you through the options to make sure that you understand all of our products. So they have a team. The bud tender is going to walk you through. They're going to ask you some medical questions about what you're suffering from, and the 22-year-old kid who's never gone to medical school but did a 2-week training as a bud tender is going to help you navigate to the right strain to treat your cataracts. Okay. All right, so it's all this sort of pseudoscientific jargon. You know what I mean? This is the imagery that they're using, and nothing has to be proven strictly per se. Rather, this cannabis is being studied for these. It's not been proven. There's no medical journals that show. It hasn't been approved by the FDA to treat anything. Okay, but don't worry, it's all being studied, and the only reason why we don't have these treatments is because of the nasty prohibitionists who outlawed this in the United States, and now it's impacted and delayed years of research from what we otherwise know about a cannabis plant, which has been known throughout time for its medicinal history. So, but don't worry, it's being studied to treat, weight control, Crohn's disease, asthma. That's a good idea. Smoke cannabis for your asthma. I'm sure that will work. I'm sure that'll work wonders. Parkinson's, tremors, glaucoma, cancers, arthritis symptoms, anxiety, hepatitis C even, apparently.
Death cures all of it. If you die, you have no disease.
Yeah, right. So, like, there's nothing that this wonder drug can't treat. Seriously, like, what can't it do?
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. A miracle. What? This is another blog. So they're trying to, what's the optimal dosage of cannabis for anxiety and depression? Now remember, studies show it makes it worse. Studies show it increases your anxiety, it makes it worse. It increases your depression, it makes it worse. Now think about the wine person. Imagine if Budweiser was advertising like this. Seriously. And think about like the wine snob that's like, oh, like this is from the valley of Shenandoah, and it has a heady finish, and it sort of has this impetuous sort of fruity, peachy taste. Okay? Like that's fatuousness. Like this is malice. Malice. It's unbelievable. This is up right now. This is a product. Now you probably can't see it, but I'm going to read it to you. Due to these potent effects, Blue Anana is the ideal strain for treating conditions such as bipolarity, fibromyalgia, and anxiety disorders.
Just a moment, let us make a picture.
Yeah, get a picture of that, and I'll share the PowerPoint with anybody that wants it.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So they have a challenge. All right. And the challenge is this. How can the single miracle product treat so many varied conditions? Okay? So they've come up with this whole mythology. All right? And it starts with the endocannabinoid system. We all apparently have an endocannabinoid system, which is responsible for your homeostasis. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So it's responsible for your homeostasis. And these are all the things that this is all of the things that the endocannabinoid system, and sometimes you may get out of balance, your endocannabinoid system might get out of balance. And so you need to supplement it with cannabinoids, which you can get from the cannabis plant. Okay. But how is it then that all of it's the same plant, with the same constituent parts. Like, what's different from one? Well, there's two different strains. There's the indica strain and there's the sativa strain, and they both have basically opposite effects. Same plant, same ingredients, but they both have opposite effects. And wouldn't you know it that when you combine these two strains, you can create these hybrids that have all of these different components and different levels of this and different levels of that. And because they have different levels of this and terpenes are things that are in all plants, just the aromatic thing, they're inert aromatic compounds and all. But with the different combination and permutations that pop out with all of these hybrids, and that creates all of the different manifold effects and treatment from this miracle drug. Okay. We got it. Okay. So, Kenneally's not standing for it. At least not in McHenry County. And what I did, and the Source Denver Post, that's just an add-on from a note, don't mind that. But what I did is we looked at some of the advertising in McHenry County. And under the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, a couple things. One, they can, despite the fact that the law says you can make no medicinal or therapeutic claims about your product, they're still doing it. So that's a problem. In addition to that, they're putting out, they were in McHenry County, the dispensaries that were there, they were putting out misinformation about the medical applications of cannabis. So I said to myself, this has to stop. So I sent them, so under the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act, I can send them a subpoena. And so I sent them a subpoena, just sort of on a lark, thinking that they were going to like buzz off, little state's attorney in McHenry County. We don't need to listen to you. It wasn't like 20 minutes after I sent the subpoena that I get a phone call from a lawyer. All right, he wants to meet. All right. So it's okay. So we meet with the lawyers, and they come to McHenry County, and there's a bunch of them, and then there's just me and my civil chief's in there, and I'm feeling like Aaron Brockovich, like we take cannabis industry. And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, first of all, like under the Cannabis Tax and Regulation Act, like, yeah, you can't be doing that, and all of this stuff about it has medicinal qualities, like you can't be doing that either. And man, were they nice. Like, I've never seen and I've been doing legal stuff, and nobody's ever treated me this nice, especially when we're negotiating. And oh no, we understand. Exactly. We understand. We're gonna scrub our websites about. And I said, okay, like I want you to scrub your websites of all of that stuff, and I don't want you to do it anymore. And I said, and I want $1 million to run an educational campaign on marijuana. And they're like, how about 100,000? And I'm like, cool. Deal. So anyway, I got $100,000, and these are, so part of it is we're putting up signs throughout McHenry County. So cannabis use is linked with schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety, and then I cite the source. Like, I'm not making it up. This is according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay?
I'm surprised he admitted.
I'll just leave it to the Biden administration.
This is my favorite one. This is according to Dr. Peter Bach of Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Okay, not that's a very well respected institution. This is one of the mock-ups, but this is just another one that's up right now. But regularly, less life satisfaction, worth, and career achievement. So that's the story of cannabis in McHenry County. Can I answer any questions or field any comments?